I was excluded from my cousin's wedding and accused of jealousy after caring for my mom during cancer. I finally cut ties for good. Hello, Redditors. I hope you can offer some advice and guidance. Am I the antagonist for severing connections with my extended family, 2 aunts and a cousin? I come from a very religious and conservative background and would appreciate your thoughts. I am a 34-year-old woman who has lost both parents, is single, and is an only child, and my mother's relatives have been treating me terribly. My cousin, who is 36 and recently married, accused me of feeling envious of her. They have ostracized and alienated me, even going so far as to fabricate hurtful falsehoods about me in an effort to turn other family members against me. They did not even invite me or inform me about her wedding abroad, only for me to see them all hurrying into an Uber with their luggage headed to the airport while sharing photos on social media. To provide some background, my mother passed away due to cancer 4 years ago. I faithfully cared for her during her 4.5-year battle with the disease, receiving little to no assistance from her family. It was an immense privilege to look after my remarkable mother, and while it was difficult, I will always treasure those moments spent with her. The only genuine support came from my mother's younger sister, Aunt 2. My mother had 3 sisters, 1 older Aunt 1, and 2 younger Aunt 2 and Aunt 3. Throughout their lives and mine, both Aunt 1 and Aunt 3 have bullied and mistreated my mother and many other family members to the extent that Aunt 2 fled to another continent to escape them, only to return a decade later during my grandmother's illness. Aunt 3 physically abused me, e.g., attempting to pull down my underwear as a child to inspect my genitals, something she obsessed over throughout my childhood, and verbally abused me, e.g., calling me derogatory names when I was just 8 years old and continuing to insult me throughout my adolescence, to the point where I developed body dysmorphia, severe anxiety, and bouts of depression. Her son severed all ties with her as soon as he began college. She also has a turbulent relationship with her daughter, whom she resents for her youth and beauty, viewing them as competition and a barrier to her own remarriage. She expresses this jealousy every time she argues with her daughter, leaving all her nieces and nephews, both from her brother and sister, to limit their interactions with her due to her abusive conduct. For instance, one of my male cousins was subjected to such severe mistreatment that he crosses the street to avoid her whenever he sees her. She once accused him of an unspeakable act towards his mother when he was just 9 years old. Yes, you read that correctly. She made that atrocious statement to a 9-year-old child, but that is still only the beginning. She has experienced 3 failed marriages and refuses to acknowledge any responsibility for her behavior. The family has enabled her toxic behavior, as she is the youngest and incredibly manipulative, frequently employing emotional extortion and verbal abuse. Aunt 1 financially mistreated my mother when she first immigrated here due to my mother's unfamiliarity with the system, language barriers, and her young age. Aunt 1 continued to exploit my grandmother and uncle, who suffered from severe health issues for 3 decades, until they both passed on. She has drained all their financial assets into her property and refuses to even discuss fairly distributing the inheritance with her living siblings, currently 3, claiming it belongs rightfully to her as the eldest. My mother and Aunt 2 were the only ones who genuinely cared for and supported both my grandmother and uncle throughout their prolonged illnesses. Aunt 1 has been malicious to every member of our extended family, including her own children. Her own daughter, the 36-year-old bride, has sought refuge from Aunt 1 verbal abuse by marrying a 50-year-old man who she claims to not love but merely likes as a friend, and whom she has known for under a few months, despite having 4 children from another relationship in a different country. With her mother undergoing cancer treatment, she views her marriage as an escape from Aunt 1 control and tyranny. We come from an Orthodox Muslim background where a girl can only leave her parental home upon marriage. I was fortunate to have a mother who encouraged my independence and passion for travel. This is something my aunts 1 and 3 have resented, treating me as an outcast and attempting to incite dissent among their children. My cousin has also been intensely envious of my autonomy, as well as the wonderful relationship I had with my beloved mother, who fiercely loved me. My mother played a significant role in raising both Aunt 1 and Aunt 3 children, as they were single parents. However, there has always been a sense of jealousy towards my mother because she was extraordinarily beautiful, something many say I have inherited. Gentle and charitable, beloved and respected within our tightly knit community. They also envied the strong bond I shared with my mother, something they both lack with their own children. Therefore, there has always been a rivalry between the eldest sister and my mother, while the youngest sister has consistently been troublesome and tyrannical. They envied how I nurtured my mother during her illness, how I managed her affairs after her passing, and how I coped with my father's passing a year later, all while grappling with depression, the threat of homelessness, and several chronic ailments. What truly enraged Aunt 1 and Aunt 2 was my ability to maintain a full-time job, earn a doctorate, and purchase a property shortly after my mother's death. All I have received from them are cruel, backhanded remarks, as they frequently attempt to diminish my achievements and make me feel inferior. Now, the latest incident that propelled me to sever ties with them occurred over the past few months. I was informed about the engagement and marriage in December 2024, with the wedding taking place last month. I was genuinely thrilled for my cousin upon hearing the news, especially since it marked the first positive development we had experienced as a family, and I reached out to congratulate her, eagerly asking how I could assist with the wedding. However, she and her mother, Aunt 1, would dismiss me at every opportunity, insisting that nothing was set in stone and they were handling it. The bride even mentioned that if it were up to her, she would inform me about her marriage the day before, fearing I would bring her bad luck. This nonsense is coming from educated individuals. I tried to care for my aunt, who has cancer, on the days I worked from home or after my job, to help alleviate some of the burden on my cousin, and received the silent treatment or remarks about how I looked plastic. I am entirely natural, by the way. All my friends and other family members believe Aunt 1 jealousy towards my mother, who was more beautiful and had a lighter skin tone, a trivial issue within our community, fuels this disdain. The fact that I resemble my mother angers her. She has consistently attempted to instill insecurities within me. She also transfers these insecurities to her daughter, who perceives me as a threat, although she is attractive in her own right. In any case, in the weeks leading up to the engagement party, I went on vacation and fell ill for 2 weeks. Despite this, I kept in contact, even though their behavior seemed increasingly odd over the phone, via WhatsApp voice notes and through messages. I continued to offer my help, which was consistently rejected. Then, 2 days before the party, I called Aunt 1 and asked what time she would like me and Aunt 2 to be ready for the celebration. Everyone else had received invitations except for us. She responded with rudeness and disdain. The day prior to the wedding, my uncle called and accused me of trying to undermine their happiness by not offering assistance. Keep in mind, I have all the text and call records, and I even gifted her a wedding present worth $1,000, which they happily accepted, showering me with hugs and affection, all while concocting lies about me to the rest of the family. On the day of the engagement party, I danced, took photos, and chatted with my cousin's friends. She only has 4, 3 of whom were criticizing her makeup, attire, venue, and the groom's looks age. She struggles to maintain friendships as she maintains that she is superior and that everyone resents her. She views relationships as transactions and takes pride in cutting people off once they no longer serve her interests. I assisted her in and out of the restroom with her dress and helped the catering staff with the venue. Everything felt fine to me, although they, Aunts 1, 3, and my cousin, were acting somewhat strangely, particularly when relatives complimented how lovely I looked and how much I reminded them of my mother. Then, my other female cousin, the daughter of Aunt 3, approached me and Aunt 2, informing us that Aunt 1 and Aunt 3 had been spreading rumors about us being envious of her life and marriage, and that we were determined to ruin her happiness. She revealed that they had already booked their tickets for the wedding abroad in December, when we had only just learned about the engagement, confirming this had been their plan from the start. She was instructed not to share this information with us. Only 4 of them in total are attending because they have severed ties with family and friends. I broke down in tears. I felt blindsided, betrayed, used, and cast aside. I did nothing to warrant this treatment. I showed my cousin the phone and laptop to share the voice messages and text exchanges I had with Aunt One and her daughter. She was stunned by how duplicitous and manipulative they had acted and cried alongside us. She expressed her sorrow upon seeing the beautiful gifts I had given, and that I even offered to cover accommodations for her and her husband at their favorite hotel before their return flight. She said she was shocked by the falsehoods and claimed her mother, Aunt 3, was complicit in this toxicity. The wedding occurred, and they plastered it all over social media. I have since blocked them on social media and my phone. My greatest heartbreak lies with dear Aunt 2, who helped raise the bride and has been treated poorly throughout this entire ordeal. So, am I the antagonist for cutting ties? Thank you for taking the time to read my lengthy post. I apologize for any mistakes. I wrote this while in tears. Story 2. I showed up to work without an assistant assigned. After hours of waiting, I left a load half-finished. The manager agreed I needed help. This incident occurred nearly 15 years ago, while I was still residing in my native country. I was employed at a warehouse functioning as a distribution center for a well-known supermarket chain. I served as an inspector in the shipping department. Essentially, the sorting section would transport the requested goods to the docks, and we would prepare and load the shipment onto the truck. In the shipping department, there were aides responsible for the physical tasks, assembling the loads on pallets, wrapping them in stretch film, and loading them onto the truck, while the inspector ensured that everything sent to the store was properly labeled and secure for transportation. Furthermore, the inspector recorded all data in the internal system, sealed the truck, and printed the load summary for the administrative team to create an invoice. Naturally, inspectors would assist aides with the heavy lifting from time to time. Often, this did not hinder our primary duties and actually expedited the process, particularly since our shift, the afternoon shift, frequently dealt with delays due to late truck arrivals. Many occasions would see us unable to complete our tasks on time, resulting in overtime and sometimes necessitating that we leave unfinished work for the night shift. This was not ideal, as each shift had its own list of stores to serve, and such delays impacted their operations. Each inspector collaborated with at least one aide, although there were times when additional aides were assigned based on the workload. Some inspectors had more stores to manage that day, some stores required additional loads, or other circumstances necessitated extra support. We had a supervisor who had been with the company for numerous years and had worked in the department prior to his promotion. The job was great, and everything functioned smoothly until a crisis arose in another department, leaving it without a supervisor. Management determined that they required someone with experience to oversee that department, so they transferred our supervisor there. In his stead, they promoted someone from a different department who lacked any leadership experience. Our department was performing well, with no demand for significant changes. However, our new supervisor had a different perspective. One day, I arrived at work, and as was customary at the start of the shift, he printed a sheet listing the stores to be handled that day and indicated which inspector was assigned to each one. Initially, everything seemed fine. He made some changes, but nothing alarming. However, before we began our work, he summoned the entire department for a brief meeting. During this meeting, he announced that he had reassigned the aides to different inspectors and presented us with a printed list. To my astonishment, there was no name next to mine. In other words, I was expected to work without an aide. I protested immediately. I cannot recall the exact details of our discussion, as this occurred quite a while ago, but essentially, his idea was that as other aides completed their assignments, whoever was free would come to assist me. This was something that already happened naturally, as our department had a strong sense of camaraderie. Additionally, no one wanted to be seen by management idling without work. Regardless, it would not be enough support, and it would overwhelm me. I attempted to present my argument, but I could not persuade him. Other inspectors were also left without aides, but they were relatively new to the company and chose not to speak up, likely out of fear of jeopardizing their jobs or for similar reasons. Realizing I could not change his decision, I accepted that I would be working without assistance. I took the signs for the stores I was responsible for, found available docks for them, placed the signs on the dock gates, noted on the printed sheet which stores were at which docks, and then proceeded to the dock of the first store I would manage. I leaned against the wall, crossed my arms, and waited. Goods began arriving, but I did not touch a single box. The dock became congested, yet I remained stationary. After several hours, the supervisor walked through the department to check on operations, observed the condition of my dock, and inquired why the load was not being prepared. I simply replied, "I don't have any aids. How am I supposed to prepare the load?" while maintaining my position with my arms crossed. Eventually, some aides came to assist me, and when they did, I supported them with the heavy lifting. However, before long, the inspectors they were originally assigned to required additional assistance, and inevitably, they abandoned my load. By the final hour of my shift, one load was ready to be loaded onto the truck, while another was only partially complete. I placed the paperwork detailing the load in a visible location for whoever would finish it and departed. As I was leaving, my supervisor inquired about the loads. Without turning around, I informed him where the papers could be found. He asked if I planned to finish them, and I did not respond. The following day, he called me in for a meeting. Upon my arrival, the manager was also present. They questioned me about the events of the previous day. I replied, "Nothing that I can recall." They raised the topic of the incomplete loads. I explained that my shift had concluded, and I was unable to stay for overtime. Thus, I had left the information for whoever would finish the work, and even told the supervisor where the documents were. I then took out my wallet, retrieved my time card receipt, and showed them that I had logged out at the designated hour. They noted that I had spent most of the shift standing with my arms crossed. I responded that I had performed my duties, which, as outlined in my contract, included merely verifying the load, supervising assembly and loading, entering data into the system, sealing the truck, and printing the load summary. Nothing beyond that. I continued to explain that any additional tasks I undertook during my shift were solely out of goodwill to assist the aides and enhance productivity. However, the day before, I had chosen to exercise my right not to engage in those supplemental tasks because I felt unjustly treated by my supervisor, who had failed to assign me a dedicated aide. That would have placed an undue burden of responsibilities on me that I was not compensated for. The manager simply looked at the supervisor and remarked, "He needs to have an aide." Then he turned to me and instructed me to leave. They remained in discussion for quite some time. That same day, I was assigned an aide, and we never addressed it again. Nothing of the sort happened thereafter. The new supervisor's tenure lasted only a few months before he returned to his prior position. He had placed too much confidence in employees he was friendly with, who, unfortunately, were not very competent at their jobs, which led to his downfall. Our former supervisor returned to his role, and everything improved once again.